Oh, Dick Van Dyke, get rid of that. Oh, again. For fuck's sake. He's a master physician, but who is Dowie?
He was one of the 2 paediatric specialists brought in by the prosecution. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, I'm a medical guy.
Well, let's just say he seems unusually invested in blaming Lucy Letby.
I'll put one of Britain's worst ever serial killers, Lucy Letby, behind bars.
I wonder when he last had to care for a neonate.
It was your job, I guess, to explain what had happened to these babies.
Yes, and he's meant to be objective, unbiased, and not at all influenced by those who instruct him. Yeah, he's flouted that.
Not by who, of course.
Precisely. That is not his job.
That was then the job of the other parts of the prosecution.
Sure, he'll correct this.
When...
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, yes. And I should add that what I did was I sent the reports to Chester Police and said, look, we've got these 15, and then it became 17 cases, where I'm concerned about what's happened. And what I said was, you need to look at the duty roster for each of these events.
Now, aside from a lifetime of observation, I've actually seen the documentary on Operation Hummingbird a couple of times, so I'm under no illusions. But are the police really so dense they need Dowie to point this out? Doesn't it seem a bit odd and defensive to you? Now, I ask because Try by Stats has presented all of this information to us, and some of it includes this from Benjamin Myers' attempt to get Dowie Evans' testimony struck out. This is proof that he was at least party to conversations about the whereabouts of the nurse when something was going on. Sounds pretty sus to me. As Myers rightly points out, these are not clinical questions.
And it soon became apparent that there was, even after the first 4 babies, there was only one nurse who was on duty for all of the events, and that was Lucy Letby. And later it emerged that she was on duty for all 17 occasions.
Well, that's not true. But we now have proof you knew they were onto a nurse from at least the 4th case. Good job.
There are no grounds for appealing any convictions.
Fact.
The convictions are absolutely solid.
Fact.
Does it not seem odd to you that he is so invested in it being Lucy Letby?
I think it helps not to be too clever.
It took every power I possess not to say something smart and funny here.
And quite frankly, it was the only reasonable explanation.
This is a unit which replaced experienced neonatal nurses with nursery nurses. There was not one specialist neonatologist, and having recently upgraded to a level 2, they were in practice more often operating at a level 3, which means they were giving significant periods of intensive care, where the consultants only carried out 2 ward rounds a week. When babies declined, how quickly would they spot it?
I mean, babies are simple things. You know, there's not a lot that can go wrong with them.
Jesus Christ.
Babies just don't go from being nice and stable to suddenly dropping dead. That just does not happen.
This is astonishing news to many, but I don't know how he explains cot deaths.
Any moments of doubt for you?
This is a man who has never doubted himself.
I think you need to keep it simple if you're a clinician. And I couldn't think of another cause, quite frankly.
Yes, the death certificates must be wrong. And then, therefore, the nurse is a serial killer. Done. Brilliant.
Immediately, I think within 10 minutes or so of arriving and having a look at these notes and over the coffee, I felt, oh my God, this baby is the victim of inflicted injury.
So it took you 10 minutes?
Yes. I found these cases not particularly complicated.
Sorry about that. Somebody tried to call me on my phone.
Not
so
at
let's
all.
start again.
I'm
Sorry.
imagining lots of people want to be in touch with you.
If you're not actually watching the screen, I suggest you look at it now. Look at this man. He is beaming. This is absurd. Maybe it's the deeply held conceit that he's a genius.
You can't vomit all over a nursery when you've only been fed 45 mLs and there is still 45 mLs still left there. Once you start thinking about what happened, then I don't think it's that difficult. I hope this does not sound blasé, but it was clear that this baby had been injected with milk or milk and air.
This mode of death is completely novel to medical science.
Injecting loads and loads of milk or milk and air directly into the stomach. And if you give loads and loads of milk into the stomach of a small baby, it interferes with their breathing because the diaphragm can't move up and down and therefore they collapse.
Now that is scientific fact. There's no real evidence for it, but it is scientific fact.
This case is not just littered with assumptions, it's built of them.
When the nurse looking after this baby went for her break, Lucy Letby came in and must have given this poor baby a huge amount of milk, all milk and air. But in addition to this, one also found, in addition to this, the only explanation was the injection of air into the circulation. That occurred in other babies as well. And some babies suffered having milk or milk and air injected into the stomach, as well as being killed.
You should never, as a clinician, decide that you don't know the cause of death.
He is a long-retired paediatrician. He's never been a pathologist or a coroner. So what's this about?
The convictions are absolutely solid. There are no grounds for appealing any convictions. This baby would not have died but for Letby's interference.
Letby hadn't met the baby by that stage, had she?
I don't know. She was certainly there when he died.
Remember this when you hear about the overwhelming circumstantial evidence. And when it doesn't align, something can always be cooked up.
The prosecution said that she could have visited the hospital while off shift.
So here we are, the standard of evidence required to lock a young woman up for the rest of her life.
But didn't put any evidence forward that she was there.
Do you really think this is good enough?
The claim was that Lucy Letby had injected air into the baby. It's nonsense. Complete nonsense.
This was the baby who died after a consultant put a needle into his liver, causing massive shock.
This programme raises concerns about how the jury could get around the medical complexity of this evidence, and these experts have written and spoken to the BBC. Now, there have been broader criticisms of Dr. Evans, where the judge had described his evidence in that case as being worthless. Also speaking to the programme, other experts expressed their concerns.
Professor Morley is a world-renowned expert in neonatology. You're saying quite clearly here you believe this baby died of natural causes. How confident are you of that?
I'm very confident.
He was doing satisfactorily.
Very premature baby. 800 grams is extraordinarily tiny.
He was 800 grams and he wasn't seen by a consultant for his first 3 days of life. By the time Lucy Letby returned to her shift and first met the baby, he had been in decline for overnight and was now vomiting bile-stained liquid with black flecks.
That's a very serious sign. I just don't believe this wild hypothesis.
He was doing satisfactorily.
Based on no evidence whatsoever that somebody forced gas into the stomach through the nasogastric tube enough to kill the baby.
It's nonsense. Complete nonsense.
Quite frankly, it was the only reasonable explanation.
Yes, because for some reason, the causes given on the death certificates were unreasonable.
It was the unusual nature of their collapses, the way they didn't respond as we'd expect to resuscitation.
Some of the babies didn't respond to resuscitation quite how we would have expected them to.
Professor Colin Morley again.
This and other cases to do with Lucy Letby I've looked at, I got the feeling that the resuscitation was suboptimal.
The thing with diagnosing air embolism is it's almost unfalsifiable.
There was nothing found in the blood system. So let me take, for example...
Well, you wouldn't find anything if you had an air embolus.
As with injection of air, unless someone sees you doing it, then you can't prove that anything... It would have been difficult to prove.
Well, it's often described as a highly complex case. When you listen, people seem to be finding this quite easy.
Very quickly obvious that someone had administered insulin to this particular baby.
Although experts in insulin say it's extremely difficult to measure.
The prosecution alleged that it would have only taken a few drops to poison each baby. But the BBC programme File on 4 spoken to a team of mechanical and chemical engineers who disagree. They say that their calculations say that it would have taken very much more, roughly 20 to 80 times more. And so there was no evidence at the trial to suggest that significant quantities of insulin had gone missing on the ward.
In what would be anathema to most police investigations, Dr. Stephen Breary, found to have harassed and bullied Lucy Letby, was employed to dredge up evidence. He did a retrospective exam looking for anomalies. Unsurprisingly, he found a couple, and these were then very tenuously linked to Lucy Letby. Ha! Bang to rights.
In early 2018, Dr. Breary was reviewing the baby's notes for the police. He found evidence the infant had been poisoned. A blood test showed the baby had high levels of insulin. It had been missed by a junior doctor.
I wonder if this is a cautionary note on why having senior doctors around is good.
We only saw the insulin poisoning cases because they were the second of twins who'd been harmed in other ways. And so this was a complete shock to me and a complete surprise.
Oh, I'm sure.
Have you ever thought that there could be some other explanation for all of this and that Lucy Letby is innocent?
Well, that was the journey we went on in the first year before we finally asked her to be removed from the neonatal unit.
One day, I think everyone will know how disingenuous this is.
That was a year of looking for all those alternative explanations, and we excluded all those things until we got down to one point, which was Lucy Letby.
They never ever spoke to the coroner, not even off the record.
It was the first sight I had of this result, and it made me feel sick, actually, thinking about it.
Some immunoassay reported insulin levels enough to kill an adult. How did this little boy make it? How's that possible?
It's been said there's no smoking gun in the Lucy Letby trial, but these insulin cases get close to it, do they, for you?
The smoking gun. It's quite important, it turns out.
They were a smoking gun for these babies, for sure.
What does that mean? It just sounds like a tacky, cheap line.
And I don't have any doubt that Lucy Letby harmed these babies.
She didn't stab one in the liver with a needle, though, did she? The funny thing is all but one of these babies had found causes on their death certificates. And these death certificates were then overturned without exhumation or any of the other retrospective evidence that has appeared in similar cases where death certificates have been overturned. It's insane. It stinks. And there are holes everywhere. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. And I will be back very soon. Cheers then.